Hello wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and in this video we are going to draw some super easy watercolor Easter eggs in Procreate. So open up the app and let's get started. As usual, the first thing to do is to create a new canvas. These are the dimensions that I'm using, but you can use whatever you want depending on your own project. The reason I have these dimensions is really just because I am using a pre-textured file that comes with some of my brushes. So you can see here they have some layers that has a really cool watercolor paper texture to it. You don't have to use this file, but if you want to check it out, it will be linked in the description below along with a promo code for the YouTube people as usual. But yeah, otherwise you don't have to use it. It is not a problem at all. So for this, we're going to start by changing the background color just so we can see what we're doing. So I'm just going to go with a random color here because I want anything but white, basically. Because we're then going to create a new layer that we're going to rename to base or shape, actually, sorry, shape. And on this layer, we are going to draw in white. So if we had the white background, we wouldn't see anything. And we're going to draw an egg shape. What a surprise, isn't it? And for that, we're going to use pretty much any brush from the inking panel. We just want a brush that is like a solid brush that doesn't have any texture, because we're going to go ahead and draw the shape of the egg. So we just want like a solid white edge shape. But take your time here. You want to make sure that this shape is going to be perfect because it's going to be the base for everything. So you can see, for example, here at the top, I have a wobbly weirdness thingy. So take the time to fix anything that might be slightly off, even if that means starting over. I mean, it's just an egg shape. It's not crazy. So don't be afraid to undo or redo whatever you need until you get this perfect egg shape, or at least the perfect in your own eyes. So once you have that, go ahead and create a new layer. This one you're going to apply as a clipping mask. And basically everything we're going to draw on this layer now is going to stay within the shape layers. So that's super helpful, and it's going to save us a ton of time because we won't have to erase. This new layer you're going to rename to base. This one is the base one. And on this one, we're basically going to add the color. And so you can pick whichever color you want. I'm going to go back with this nice teal color. I like to go with pastel color for this project, but you could really do whatever you like. And I'm going to be using the Ultimate Watercolor brushes that are also going to be linked in the description below. They're really great for watercolor effects. I mean, I created them because I felt like Procreate didn't have good enough options. But if you don't want to buy them, that's totally fine. You can go in the airbrushing panel and selecting the hard brush and lowering the opacity, which is the slider here, around 30% or something like that. And you can see you're going to get some sort of overlay. You're not going to get the watercolor texture, but it's better than nothing, Otherwise, if you have the watercolor brushes, go ahead and select the basic watercolor. And all we're doing now is we're kind of adding the color. And for that, I like to go in a few passes. Since we're using watercolor brushes or brush with lowered opacity, every time you go over, you're going to kind of layer the color, and it's going to get darker and darker every single time. So the first time you're just going to draw a basic shape, leaving a little opening, which is going to be the light, and then you're going to make that shape smaller and smaller to create some shadows. So make sure you look at the video if you're a bit confused here, but it's really not super difficult. And once you have that, go ahead and put your background to the color you want it to be in the end. In my case, I'm just going to go and put it back to white, since now we can actually see the egg. You might want to redo this step with a slightly darker and different color. So I'm going with a bit more of a purple. It's not purple, but slightly more purple. And if you have the watercolor brushes, you can also use the color shifting brushes. Otherwise, you're going to use the same brush, the same airbrushing brush. And you're just going to, layer. This is going to be the key way of getting watercolor effect, is layering some random spots of slightly different colors and then blending them in. To blend them in, you can use the smudge tool, set it to soft brush. That's going to work. Or if you have the watercolor brushes, you can set your brush, like paintbrush tool, to the water blender. And at this point, you're just going to blend some of the edges that look a little bit too digital, and it's kind of like you're dropping water on like real watercolor, like real life watercolor and paper. So think of it as dropping water and blending your pigments in together. You want to make sure that you do have some pigments that, like, you want to keep some hard edges in there so that it looks a bit more interesting and not just a perfect gradient. Otherwise, it's not going to look like watercolor if it's just perfectly smooth. You do want to have some spots that look a bit more blotchy and stuff like that. So it's kind of like finding a balance of spots and also smooth gradients. Speaking of gradients, once you have a base that you like, we are going to add some color variation with this really cool technique that is super simple. So you select your selection tool, set it to freehand, and you just draw a wobbly shape towards probably the bottom right, because we're going to start with a shadow. And then you just feather the selection somewhere between 20 and 30%. You're then going to select hue, saturation, brightness in the adjustment panel and apply it to the entire layer. And from there, you're going to be able to shift the hue to get some color variation. You can go whichever side you want depending on the effect you want. I'm going on the right to get a more purplish tone. And since I'm drawing something on the bottom, I'm also going to lower the brightness and up the saturation so that it looks like a shadow. And you can use this technique as many times as you want to add as much color variation as you want. And guys, if you've watched it this far in the video, please go ahead and comment below the words "egg hunt." That way I can know where you are at in the video, and it really helps me edit and create better tutorials because I just get to learn from that basically. And also it's really cool for me because you guys know me, but I don't necessarily know you. And when you comment, I can see your username in your face and I feel less alone. So just go down, comment "egg hunt," and we'll keep going. So at this point, we're ready to add the decorations. And to do that, just go ahead and create a new layer. It is also going to be a clipping mask, and this one you're going to rename it to decorations. And you can really draw whatever you want on here. I'm going to show you this really cute little spring flower pattern, but you could use pretty much any of my other watercolor tutorial, like the roses would look really good, or the crocus that we did just a few days ago. So pretty much anything you want, honestly. And you're just going to select the same brush that you used. So in my case, I'm going to go back to the Dark Edges watercolor. And if you select the color you used first for your base, you can go in the harmony here, and then you're going to know that every color is going to show up there is just going to work well with your base color. So I just went with the yellow color here because I was looking for something for the center of my flowers, which is exactly what we are going to draw next. And it's super simple. You're just sprinkling some little circles in some spots of your eggs. I like to kind of keep it on like mostly one side and leaving a spot without anything. I think it looks better than just having a whole pattern covering the entire egg, but that's just me. And then I like to go back with my base color, making it darker, and then adding some petals, which I kind of have two types of flowers in this pattern. I have one type that is very simple, super small. It's kind of a forget-me-not type of flower. And so the petals are literally just 5 little circles that are the same size of the center, the yellow center. So you can definitely do that as well. It's super easy. And I quite like to make it like imperfect. I want it to feel like it's an actual hand-painted egg, or actually a painting of an hand-painted egg. We're getting super meta here. But yeah, nothing difficult. And you might also want to sprinkle some around the edges of your egg when there is no real yellow center, just so that it feels like it's wrapping around, you know, the design is wrapping around the egg. For the second type of flower, I like going with the coloring pencil because I'm going to actually draw in white. And if you're drawing with, you know, watercolor brushes or a brush that has a lower opacity, basically watercolor and white, it just doesn't work in real life, and it doesn't work really well in Procreate either. So going with just a more regular brush if you want to draw in white, that is what I would definitely recommend. And for the second type of flower, I'm going with 6 or 7 petals, and I'm having them be a bit more like ovals instead of circles. But again, you can see I'm going really quickly because I like I was saying, this hand-painted, crafty, homey feel. But you could really just do, like I was saying earlier, any design and spend a whole lot of time getting something super intricate, and that would look really good as well. And while you have your white paintbrush, you might want to go ahead and add just random little dots. That looks really cool. It's a nice way of making the piece feel a bit more sophisticated. And yeah, it can help just filling some blank spots that you have, but still keeping in mind that we are going to add some leaves in the next step. And by next step, I mean now. So going back to your color palette, if you select your light yellow, go back in the harmony and select analogous in the top. You should have a green now that you can select, and you can make it a bit darker and more saturated. And that's really a good way of having something that, again, you know is going to work with the palette that you have so far. And you're going to select the same brush that you used for the base and the center. So in my case, it was the Dark Edges watercolor. And seriously, for the leaves, you can just be super quick again and just draw basic little shapes that kind of add a touch of color. That's really what we're after here. We don't want to have something super precise, at least in this pattern that I'm showing you. There's no need for something super precise. We just want to add a little bit of texture, some depth, some details, and mostly a touch of color. And since we're using brushes that have transparency to them, we actually see the base color a little bit through the decorations. So a quick way to get rid of that is to double tap on the decorations layer, click select, which selects the decorations, and then double tap on the base layer and selecting clear. So that way you can see here, if we hide the decorations, it just erased the decorations in the base layer. So that's a really nice way of having maybe more vibrant colors on the top. Another cool thing that you can do, this one you need to have the watercolor brushes because they come with some watercolor PNGs. So you can import them by going in the wrench icon menu here, selecting add and then import a file. You'll then be able to locate the folder on your iPad, and once you have it, just click on it. And you can select really any splotch that you want. The color doesn't matter. Just look at one that you like the shape and the texture of. You can then move it around and place it roughly where you want on the egg with your finger, but we're going to move it later anyway, so it doesn't matter that much. And then you're going to click on this layer, apply it as a clipping mask as well, and set the blending mode to color burn, which is going to look crazy, but it doesn't matter because we're going to turn it to black and white by using the hue, saturation, brightness panel again and lowering the saturation right down to the bottom, and you might want to play with the brightness a little bit so that it shows up. So now you can see we have some extra watercolor texture, and you can repeat this step as many times as you want. So inserting a file, selecting a splotch, whichever one you want, roughly placing it on the egg with your finger, and then creating a clipping mask from this mask, or this layer I should say, setting the layer to color burn, and then hue, saturation, brightness to the entire layer. You lower the saturation down to 0. So that's a really cool way of adding some extra watercolor texture super quickly, and you can then change the opacity a little bit so that they both blend together. You can move your layers around so that you can see the edges of the watercolor splotch, which, you know, again, it's just a quick way of adding a bit more texture to your piece if you do have the watercolor brushes and the splotches. And the last little thing we're going to do is we're going to add some splatters. So for that, I like to create a new layer, rename it to splatters. This layer doesn't have to be a clipping mask. Actually, it shouldn't be a clipping mask, otherwise you're not going to have splatters around your egg, only on the egg. And you're going to change the blending mode to linear burn, because that way the splatters just look better. You can pick any color you want, and I like to go with the splatter brush that comes with the watercolor brushes again. If you don't have the brush set, you can go with this brush from the spray paint panel, but it doesn't look super good in my opinion. So it's better than nothing, but it's not optimal. But yeah, you're just going to add some splatters as a really nice way of finishing your piece, making it feel a bit more polished, refined. I don't know, it's just a little bit more interesting. So there you go, this was how to draw a watercolor egg, Easter egg in Procreate. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to give it a thumbs up because it really does help the channel, and I would also really love to see what you guys create. So make sure to share the results with me either on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. The brush that I use will be linked in the description below, again with a promo code just for you guys. And don't forget to subscribe because I put out new videos every single week. I'll see you soon.